ESPN reporter and host Malika Andrews leading the coverage for her show NBA Today. Live on site from Denver, Game 5 tonight, tip-off 8:30 Eastern on ABC. Malika, thanks for joining us. Give me the game plan as you go into an interview with the Joker. You had great questions, but you know you're going to be like Bam Adebayo trying to guard him here.
Bring up horses. That's thing number one. It's something that we have in common, and so I feel like it had to be on the list. And I was asked several times if horses was going to come up, and I had to say absolutely. But no, for me, I feel like the general audience is still getting to know Nikola Jokic a little bit, which is wild to say about a two-time MVP, about a player that has been an all-star over and over, that's one of the greatest players, if not the greatest player that is playing right now. I feel like his personality, we are still getting to know little glimpses of it outside of the horses, outside of the Sombor shuffle or the Sombor sling or whatever you want to call it. And so for me, it was just like, how can I get this guy to tell some stories? Because I know that they are great. I know that he always has his teammates laughing and chuckling. And what he does on the court, Dan, is just, it's so insane that how can we get to know this guy a little bit better?
And sometimes great players can't describe what makes them great. That they just do it. It's reactionary. And plus, I don't know if he wants to. I don't know if you've sat down and interviewed somebody who is that apprehensive to talk about legacy or any, he wants to deflect, but I mean, he fits in a small category. Everybody's about their brand, and let me tell you how great I am. He doesn't want any part of that.
No, I fully believe that when Nikola Jokic is done playing basketball, he is going to be done playing basketball. It's so clear what's important to him. It is his daughter, it is his family, it is his brothers who show up every game, and you can hear them no matter where you are at in the arena. It is his teammates. And it's winning, but it's not winning in a way that he needs to talk about it every single day. And that's part of what makes him remarkable, especially in this age, like you talked about. When I asked him about he wants to talk about his teammates. That's the thing. When you ask him about himself, he is always going to say, well, this is how someone else helped me to get to this point. He even talked about it in his general media session yesterday when he was asked about winning and who he wants to share it with. He says it's the people that have always been there. He's the guy who hangs with his day ones, and that's it. And that's what he's going to continue to do.
Plus, if you're around athletes from war-torn countries, there's no nonsense about them. Like Giannis was, is this a disappointment? This is somebody who grew up having one meal a day. Like, I know disappointment. I know struggle. I know adversity. Yeah. Their perspective is different than ours.
There's just a unique appreciation, it seems, for what a player like Nikola, a player like Giannis, who I've had the great privilege of interviewing over and over, a perspective that they keep that I think maybe comes from a place of, we weren't always told that this was going to happen. We were not put into a funnel when we were a 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old playing in AAU basketball. And don't get me wrong, it is incredibly difficult, as you know, to make the NBA. There is no sure bet, just like you were talking about. You can't say for sure the Miami Heat are counted out tonight. There's no sure bet you're going to make it to the NBA. But there is this inherent belief that's been fed to many, many young players that wasn't fed to someone like Nikola Jokic. And sure, in part, that's because he was playing water polo up until he was in his mid-teens, right? And that's part of where we get these incredible passes from, is the other sports that he played. But I think that's a big part of it too. He's centered around something that isn't just making the biggest contract that he is going to make in the NBA. We had a conversation yesterday about he almost, when Nikola was drafted 41st, as everyone knows, a Taco Bell commercial was playing when he was drafted, right? And we didn't even get to see the footage playing on live television because he was drafted 41st overall. So he's drafted, and he didn't plan to come over to Denver. He planned to stay over in Spain. He basically had a contract that was essentially signed with the Spanish team. He was playing for Mega at the time. And the Spanish officials, they came to watch him play. His plan was to be stashed for a couple of years. And as we know, sometimes players who are stashed, they never make it over to the NBA. He had the worst game of his life, he says, when those Spanish officials came to watch him play. 4 points, 3 rebounds, couldn't defend, a broomstick. And so the Spanish officials said, we're good. We don't want this guy. And only then did he say, all right, I guess I'll report back to Denver. We might not have
Wow.
seen this guy play. Like, that's what we're talking about when we talk about Nikola Jokic. And now he is dazzling on the highest stage and is one win away from the franchise's first title.
And I think that's the real benefit of all of this. We're talking to Malika Andrews, ESPN host, NBA Today live on site from Denver. That'll be tip-off tonight, 8:30 Eastern on ABC. That we're almost forced to watch him because you have to go out of your way to watch him. And even at the mothership, you're not leading with Denver highlights because what are you going to show? A nice crisp bounce pass. And so he's caught up in the highlight culture. But this forced everybody when he played the Lakers. Now you have to watch him because you're tuning in for the Lakers, whether you love them or not. And then by proxy, the number of people have been like, man, he is good.
Right, Lil Wayne.
Yeah, he won 2 MVPs, but they almost had to see it to validate. Like, yeah, he is really good. He just is economically great. And when you say, like, I yelled at Kendrick Perkins through the TV.
I do every day.
Yeah, when he's saying, oh, he's padding his stats, and I'm going, there's 50 players in the NBA who took more shots per game than he did during the regular season.
He is incredibly
That's not
efficient.
padding your stats.
No. The one we kind of all joke about, right, is the one rebound in Phoenix where it's like, oh, okay, like maybe we're going to go there, but no, that's not what this player is, right? I do think Nikola Jokic, I've been really lucky. So my first ever internship in the business was at the Denver Post. It was Jamal Murray's rookie year, and so I was lucky to get a glimpse of what that team was going to look like then. And it was vastly different, right? This was the Jameer Nelson, the Gary Harris team, with whether or not Jamal Murray is going to be able to exist in this ecosystem. And then my very first Christmas Day game was for ESPN Sidelines was in Denver. But I do think Nikola Jokic, I don't want to overly defend my colleagues, but I do think he's a player you have to see in person to fully appreciate, because I can tell you on TV that little touch pass in game 1 to Aaron Gordon, I'm sure that resonated no matter where you are. But seeing it in person, there was this like collective gasp of the entire audience. And this is Denver Nuggets fans who have been watching this guy play since he came into the league, of like, how did he defy physics that way? How does that even work? And so there's just your appreciation for what he can do gets taken to another level when you watch him in person, because he isn't going to be the sexiest dunker. You know, he talks about how he couldn't do a push-up, right? When he came into the league, he had to work with Felipe to get his conditioning to where it is now. But my God, when you watch the complete game that he puts together, he is up there, you know, with the greats.
Yeah, we talk about basketball IQ. You can actually see IQ when you watch him because they're just little things that he does, and he plays the angles. I'm always telling my guys that there's certain guys who see the game in a different way than we do. And that's why they're amongst the greatest of all time. They just see angles. They see openings. They learn how to take advantage of all those things. And, you know, then I'm looking at the Miami Heat. We gave them credit for the Heat culture and all the undrafted players, but then it feels like the undrafted players are playing and showing you why they shouldn't have been drafted, because they're not able to kind of keep this up on a consistent basis. What is missing from Miami? What has been missing in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, you know, I think, right, Richard Jefferson has his recipe for success. You need 2 games from your stars. You need 1 game you're not supposed to win and 1 game from your others. And I think that whether or not your others are undrafted is somewhat irrelevant. But at Miami, you know, I wonder, I know Jimmy Butler says you don't care about my ankle health, and neither do I, so it's not going to be an excuse. But when you watch the Milwaukee series, the way he was driving, the way he was attacking, and even on his drives in game 4, he oftentimes would then kick it out. And so I do wonder a little bit if, you know, the greatest, I believe, arguably the greatest individual Jimmy Butler game we saw was game 5 in the NBA bubble. I was lucky enough to be there when he's hanging over the stanchion, essentially plays all 48 minutes and wills this Miami Heat team that was hurt, that was struggling, to force the Lakers to a game 6 that they ultimately lost. I just wonder if Jimmy has that. I know Jimmy doesn't care if I wonder or you wonder whether or not he has that.
Yeah.
But I have to ask that question Because as much as you need a game from a Gabe Vincent, from a Max Strus, from a Duncan Robinson to be able to contribute and give you that extra pizzazz, it's got to start with Jimmy. And he hasn't been at the level that he has been. And he says he's fine. So you got to take him sort of at face value for that. But you have to wonder if he has one more left in the tank, because that's what it's going to take.
The biggest story in the offseason that intrigues you the most, Dame Lillard, Chris Paul, James Harden,
Kyrie Irving.
Oh yeah, and Kyrie. Out of those four, who is going to make the biggest headline?
Who's going to make the biggest headline? Probably Kyrie Irving, just because the combination of teams and the player that he is. My personal curiosity, I am very curious about Chris Paul, right? We're talking about a future Hall of Famer who hasn't quite gotten to the mountaintop yet.
You don't think Dame is traded?
I mean, Dame said over and over again, Portland, 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 Portland. The day that Dame is traded, I will be surprised. I will be. Just because it's not because I think it's impossible, but because we've sort of heard this chatter so many times before, I'm a little bit at the point of, I'll believe it when I see it. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. It's just more about, there's been so many conversations like this for so many years ramping up to this point. And it doesn't feel like it's ever gotten to that inflection and just gotten there. And so I sort of feel the same way this year.
Kyrie stays in Dallas?
Yeah, I think Kyrie stays in Dallas. It makes the most, financial sense for him. And I think that they need him. Luka is on the clock. They need to prove that they can keep stars, keep Kyrie happy, and get to a point that they can win. They need to go out and get some defensive anchors. They need to go out and fill around. But I think that Kyrie Irving should stay in Dallas.
Why would James Harden want to go to Houston as opposed to staying with the team that can contend?
If I had that answer, I think I would be more of a betting woman. But if my best understanding, right, is that he went to, I covered him in Brooklyn. He went there to win. He went to Philadelphia to be in what he felt was a less volatile locker, more apt to win situation. It didn't totally work. There was enough butting heads with coaching staff, with this and that at some point, happiness rules the day. And in Houston, he will be welcomed back, it seems like, with open arms. But the question that will follow him there is the window on winning just closed? Because clearly Houston, even hiring a great coach like Ime Udoka, just doesn't seem to be in that position at all right now.
Did you ever get knocked over when you were doing sideline?
Yeah, I have. Actually, I've gotten ball in the head, but it didn't fully knock me over. I've gotten taken out by Richard on set. But never been fully knocked over, just ball in the head.
We want to attach Chris Paul to the Lakers because that gets clicks. Are you attaching Chris Paul to the Lakers?
I'm not so sure. I mean, first of all, I don't think the Lakers are going to do, and you need Bobby Marks on for all the financials of all of this, but they did a 3-star, and I know it's a vastly different player, but they did the 3-star experiment with Russell Westbrook, LeBron, and Anthony Davis. And so depending on how those financials work out and what they can keep, which I would need to look at, they've learned their lesson there. I believe they're not going to sacrifice depth. And that's, by the way, that's a decision that more and more teams are going to have to make now with the new CBA. Essentially, you're locked into 2 stars and then filling out. If you get 3, it's really, really hard to fill out the rest of the team. So I would be a little bit surprised because of that. And then also we've seen LeBron team up with his, banana boat brethren, Carmelo Anthony being one of them, players he's close to. And it hasn't always panned out the way that we all maybe thought it would. Yeah. And so I think between those two things, if that happened, if Adrian Wojnarowski reported that, I'd look down at my phone, I would say, I would not. I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, of course, duh. Like I saw that coming.
Great stuff. Have fun today and tonight. And thanks for joining us, Malika.
Thanks so much, Dan. By the way, Nikola Jokic, new horse, win or lose, he says.
I like that. What's he going to name the horse? That's what I want to know.
Dan Patrick, duh.
No. I would think Jamal.
I like it. Although then when you get into the ride, you think, you know what, we're just going to
I'm going to get on Jamal. You're right. Malika Andrews, the mothership. NBA Today live from Denver. Game 5 tonight. Tip off at 8:30 Eastern on NBC.